Back when Derek is still a child, an old man throws a glowing hand toward the sky and starts this whole mess with a title card that already sounds like a bad omen. He is the volatile type, the sort who loses his temper at kids over pranks, so nobody is exactly shocked when the story treats him like a walking warning label. Years before all this, Derek sits by a campfire in the wilderness, and then the air around him starts to change. The old man watches as the boy lights up with blue mana, and Derek finally grabs hold of the flow instead of just reaching for it. The power keeps climbing, and his face snaps into focus as the mana surge rolls over him. By the time the old man stands in the middle of that blue and yellow storm, Derek is already forcing a massive construct into shape, which is a wild way to spend a night when most kids are supposed to be sleeping. Then the story pauses on a sleeping figure and calls it the shape of everything he never got to have, which tells you this isn't just raw talent, it is hunger wearing a human face. Later that same night feels so long that Derek just sits by the fire and stares into the dark, as if the sky owes him answers and is taking its sweet time. The mood drops into rain, and Derek is suddenly in the middle of a beating so hard even the bruises get their own narration. He curls up, then looks up through the storm and finds a blue system window hanging over him like a very rude miracle. 4 years pass like that, and the world settles into a calmer village at the foot of the mountains while Derek keeps growing into that strange talent. Then Denise, a noble lady in a brown cloak and red dress, sits him down and tells him to close his eyes and feel his mana, because apparently even gifted kids need someone to stop them from freewheeling into the ceiling. Denise leans in and checks the result, then makes it plain that Derek has an impressive amount of innate mana. The next beat jumps ahead to Katya getting an offer she cannot refuse, and that push leads straight into the magic list being handed over, with combat spells and other abilities finally landing on his sheet. That talent ends up tied to practical work when the tavern keeper lays out a simple job. Go subdue a few monsters on the outskirts of the Grand Duchy of Duplain, a Grand Ducal territory where this sort of trouble keeps crawling back. Katya refuses on the spot, so the tavern keeper brings in another woman and tells them both flatly that these are their clients. Out in the Grand Duchy of Duplain, the real test starts when a creature launches a blue attack, and Derek answers with red glowing eyes and a blade. He takes the hit, drives in harder, chases it down with the weapon still up, and finishes the fight with one last clean strike before the thing can make the mistake of standing back up. Derek stands over the aftermath with blue electricity still crackling around him, the kind of finish that makes a job look expensive even when it started cheap. Back at Belden's Tier, the tavern where mercenaries take requests, the crowd can only stare and mutter about how this rookie just turned into a noble's dog for pocket change. The next question hits harder than the monster did. Derek never even named a proper price, so why on earth would he take that offer? When the answer comes out, it is 1 silver coin, and the whole room practically chokes on the number. Derek's side of mercenary logic is simple enough though, because clients are clients and motives can sit in the corner and behave. The story jumps to the next day in the Grand Duchy of Duplain, the Grand Ducal territory where this whole mess keeps breathing. Then the masks come off, and Derek realizes the so-called dispatch officer is really the Grand Steward, while the scullery maid is actually the head maid, which is a very fancy way to say everyone here is hiding their rank under work clothes. That realization lands right as Diela calls for Valerian, her father, to look at what is happening. Valerian snaps back that the one who needs to mind dignity is not him but Diela, because she has gone too far and is laying hands on the people he hired. The argument spills into a formal confrontation, with authority figures lined up and everyone suddenly acting like manners matter. Diela starts to defend herself and gets only a few words out before Valerian cuts her off, tells her that deciding this is not her call, and then grabs her by the hair like he is settling the discussion with one ugly motion. He follows that with a brutal strike, and Diela takes the hit hard enough to drop out of the exchange. Then he repeats the same line about this not being her decision because apparently one reminder was not enough for the room. In the bright space that follows, Derek and Diela stand together while the tension finally has room to breathe. Her face shifts as she introduces him as the magic tutor brought from Ebelstein, and Derek answers the whole mess by telling her to stay behind him, which is a nice change when everyone else has been throwing furniture and authority around. From there, the paperwork side of the job shows up. Someone starts writing on aged parchment, and an older man asks whether Derek can handle magic at all. Derek admits he can only manage a little 1-star magic, which is not exactly a brag, but it is enough for the contract to keep moving, especially once the cyan aura wraps around him and the signed document comes out like the deal finally learned to stand up straight. That confidence gets tested immediately when Diela is smashed down hard and debris flies everywhere on the count of 4. Even after that, she still pushes the point that magic tutors should have lined up for this at Duplain, then admits she tried almost every famous magic master on the continent, which makes Derek look less like a random hire and more like the last man left in the room who might actually be useful. Diela says she picked Derek for more than raw talent, pointing out that he still comes off refined and kind even if he started out as a mercenary hire. That lands hard in a room full of authority figures, because now Derek is not just the tutor in the corner, he is the one she decided could actually shape this house. The next moment goes straight off the rails, as Derek gets shoved or struck, and then he is left soaked near a basket while Diela snaps that she thought a sewer rat had wandered in. She keeps mocking him for being drenched in gutter water, which is a bold move for someone who already took the first swing. Derek takes the hit, steadies himself, and then something in him shifts as the pressure of the room turns into an actual response. He mutters his frustration, but the real answer is the power flaring around him, and suddenly he is not just enduring the household mess, he is starting to read it. That understanding pulls the story into a sharper register, with Derek watching the gap between people who should be able to talk and clearly cannot. In the bright, formal space, a taller figure in a dark cloak looms over a kneeling girl in red, and Derek is already thinking about how to deal with people who only hear force. From there, he lays out his answer in plain terms. He will try to understand others, accept them, and take them in. But if simple understanding fails, then he will find another way through. He follows that up with the blunt rule that everyone should be treated with consideration and respect, which sounds polite right up until it starts sounding like an order. Elenta reacts first, stunned that Derek is speaking like this at all, while the argument nearby keeps boiling over. Valerian is being held back by a companion as he screams in rage, and the whole scene feels one shouted name away from becoming a full-on disaster. Derek then swings the fight back in his own direction by striking Diela across the face and immediately calling out the rules of the house around it. He says it was permitted by her grace, then tells Diela to come with him and orders Reg not to interfere, turning the whole exchange into a very public lesson in who actually has the floor. Diela obeys and walks off, and that movement leads Derek and Elente back to the old room in the main house that was left untouched. Derek remembers that Diela used to love drawing, but she never finished her work and always left blank spaces. And now he realizes that the same unfinished pattern is being echoed in her fate. That recognition hits him so hard, he blurts out that they have to stop her from being sent to the monastery. He freezes on a sudden realization, then digs through the document and notebook in front of him while Elente watches, and the sight of the painting, the dark notebook, and those leaf and vine markings finally pushes him into visible emotion. Whatever Derek sees there sends him straight into motion, and the last thing the scene gives him is a desperate escape through rain and forest at night. It is less a calm exit and more the kind of run that says he has found something important and cannot afford to stay put for even a second. Derek gets tossed back as the exchange turns ugly, and a fireball slams through the space where he just was. The blast keeps chewing forward while the dark-haired opponent throws up a hand and then freezes at the sight of the spell coming at him again. Derek snaps his arm up and fires the attack straight into the air instead of eating it head on, and the next burst goes off with enough force to rattle everyone watching. One unlucky onlooker stares up in shock for half a second too long, which is exactly how you end up in the wrong place when magic starts swinging chairs around. The explosion keeps blooming red and violent, and the target gets swallowed in the middle of it, while screaming on the way down. The blast slams him deeper into the wreckage, because standing still in front of Derek right now is a very bad hobby. A female combatant recoils in panic as the pressure keeps rising, then staggers through fresh claw-like cuts while tears and pain start showing on her face. She crouches under a rain of black slash attacks, gets flattened to the ground, and only manages a hoarse groan after the hits stop coming. Then the whole pace changes when a blue magical blade ignites in Derek's hand, and he surges forward to counter. He is no longer just surviving the test, he is forcing it to answer back. Later, Derek listens to a remark about a lady being shut away in the annex all day, and the way he puts it makes her isolation sound like a trap instead of a privilege. She panics at the idea of running at all, and the fear on her face says she has already started thinking about what she might lose if she does. Derek drops to a knee with glowing blue magic spread across the ground, working the problem from the root instead of swinging at it. He recognizes the painted forest scene for what it is, then realizes the lady has been unconsciously catching mana from the vast nature around her and putting it into the painting without even meaning to. The rain-soaked memory shifts again, and someone sits with their back turned while the storm hammers down around them. The mood turns desperate fast as a face twists in distress. A hand reaches for the sword above, and then the figure ends up kneeling with both hands on the ground like they have run out of every clean option left. The last stretch lands on the real wound underneath all the fighting. One person snaps at another for being obsessed with bloodlines, and the answer comes back with raw despair that bloodline might be the only thing they have left. By the end, the figure is hunched in the rain, thinking in fragments that they still need someone, which is a pretty bleak place to leave a noble argument. Derek watches a pink-haired girl strain through the latest test, and she finally snaps that no matter how hard she tries, the trick still will not work. That sends the whole thing into the next gear, because now it is not about effort anymore. It is about whether she can force mana to answer at all. He keeps staring at her and blurts out the obvious existential mess. What is she even supposed to be? Then the answer comes in motion as blue power kicks through the weapon, her eye lights up with tears, and Derek sees the whole thing start to stabilize instead of collapsing again. The energy swings from messy to dangerous in one go, with a massive blue slash tearing down from the sky, then the weapon itself finally settling under the mana. More blue fire rains at her, but she drives the power through her hands and rises inside the glow instead of getting flattened by it. Blue magic, it turns out, is much easier to respect once it stops acting like a tantrum. Derek calls the test a success and praises the lady for getting the power to answer. Then he cuts straight to the lesson. This is only a manifestation of mana, not true magic, and the first thing it does is ripple out invisible waves around him. And Elente, seeing that pattern, Derek tells Elente she belongs to the wild school, the branch that feels mana through nature instead of the usual noble drills. He says he already saw the paintings she drew, which is the clue that her sensitivity was hiding in her art the whole time, and she had been transferring what she felt on canvas without knowing why. With that solved, Derek tells Alente the treatment is complete and that she should be able to walk now. He does not let her coast there though, because the next breath is a reminder that manifesting mana is only the first step, and she still has a long road ahead. That success starts leaking into the broader room, where the old men and nobles begin reacting to the fact that the girl finally manifested mana at all. One man scolds Diela for needing to be polite and calls the whole situation troublesome, while another throws out the blunt shock that she manifested mana, then sends her back to return this afternoon before he starts wiping his face like he cannot believe what he just saw. Derek catches the remark, turns back with a hard look, and asks what was just said. The paperwork and signatures come next, because once the verdict is in, the document starts moving and somebody has to make the result official. At the ornate desk, the bearded man hears the report that Diela manifested magic while Alente stands below with the others, and the room shifts from doubt to quiet confirmation. Then the scene explodes upward into a blue wing-like form against the sky, which is a dramatic way to say this little lesson has become everyone's problem now. Derek answers the mood swing with blunt dismissal, telling someone that acting spiteful will not change anything. He follows that with a close look at his own power, red eyes glowing as he warns that using it the wrong way will backfire, and then another warning lands with the same cold edge as he tells her there is a way to use it that is not stiff and awkward. The warning is not just talk, because Alente takes the hit from the magical force while Derek watches it happen. He has already been pushing her toward control instead of panic, and now the lesson sticks the only way it can, right through the impact. Alente's progress jumps from raw magic to actual control, and Derek praises the fact that she can throw up an ice wall on command instead of flailing around with it. That should be a victory lap, but the moment she starts showing off, the room shifts into something much less polite. From a tree, Valerian watches Alente walk up with a book, and then the whole thing turns into a bragging contest about magic flow and talent. The lesson doesn't stay tidy for long either, since the next beat has the children practically floating in the spellwork like nobody in the room bothered to read the safety rules. Elsewhere, someone masked answers a call in an ornate room, and the conversation immediately centers on Diela, which is never a comforting topic when nobles start asking questions over tea. The blonde woman lays it out plain. Diela is not someone to take lightly, and that warning lands before the social gears can even stop grinding. That tension snaps forward when Diela suddenly barges in with a raised fist and demands to play with Derek. As subtlety again misses the appointment, Derek's face goes dead serious, and when she starts pleading for another way, the talk turns from games into consequences real fast. The complaint gets sharper when the brunette points out that Derek is the only one Diela actually follows, which puts him right in the middle of the mess, whether he likes it or not. He checks the doll-like creation's result and then calls it out like it might bite somebody, which is fair because magical experiments love to act innocent right up until they aren't. At the Grand Hall, Derek stands at center stage while a servant greets him with the kind of line that means everybody has already heard too much about him. The atmosphere curdles into menace almost immediately, with the word chaos practically hanging over the gathering like a bad decision in fancy clothes. The praise around Derek turns practical when one girl says bringing him to the Grand Duke's estate was the right call, and another adds that she still has work to do in Ebelstein, so Derek is getting left to handle the rest. Then Count Uday introduces himself in the carriage, because apparently this conversation needed one more noble with a title and an opinion. Inside the carriage, Diela and the others stumble into a tense explanation about somebody forgetting to give advance warning, and the mood stays awkward enough to deserve its own seat. Diela looks away and admits she wasn't properly warned either, while the next line cuts in with hesitation about her mother, which is never a phrase that sounds relaxed in a noble household. The older man shuts the volume down and tells them to lower their voices. Then the talk drifts into the practical problem. Finding a capable magic teacher is not easy. One woman suggests bringing in her brother Flam, but the idea gets swatted aside just as fast, because a commoner tutor with no name is exactly the kind of person nobles love to underestimate right before they need him. Valerian gets ordered to step back, and the reason becomes clear when the argument escalates into talk of qualifications and then straight into a magic duel. Derek's role in all this is no longer theoretical, and when Valerian questions whether Diela has really reformed, the last line lands like a family accusation nobody can laugh off. Diela crossed the line first, and the argument snaps from words into force. Magic lashes out, the air fills with motion, and the whole thing stops being a polite dispute and starts looking like someone forgot the room was still standing. Diela takes the hit from the first wave, then throws back a brutal complaint about Duplain itself, calling the house past its prime while a bear stands in the mix like this is somehow normal dinner conversation. She still looks locked in, and when she demands help winning, it's clear she wants victory more than comfort. A portrait crackling with magic hangs over the tension, and then the fight jumps to a rooftop setup, where one girl drops in from above while a man waits with a ring in hand in a formal-looking exchange. He cuts through the theatrics and tells them to begin, which is never a sentence that leads to anything calm. Derek clocks that the opponent is only using basic magic manifestation, not some star-ranked spell, so the real problem is not raw power, but control and timing. He keeps pressing with another assault, and the fight immediately starts showing why this is a different animal from a clean noble duel. Now Derek channels green energy through his weapon and drives it forward, but the woman catches the blast and answers by firing green force back up at him. He crosses his arms to tank the counter, and then a massive green blade drops out of the exchange, followed by an explosion so hard it turns the whole space into a mess of colliding magic. When the dust clears, Derek stands there almost untouched, which makes the shouted panic of Diela land even harder. Someone watching realizes he never even blinked, and that tiny detail says a lot more than any speech could. Diela keeps moving with a green aura and a hard stare, while a skeleton shows up in the chaos and the fight turns into a brutal power test. Derek realizes his opponent's magic should have landed but didn't trigger properly, and that one missed activation changes the whole rhythm of the duel. He gets blasted across the floor, then immediately reads the trick. The attack comes from below the platform. Kelbrum Salon's rules matter here, because leaving the platform counts as a loss, but nobles never bother thinking through the loophole until someone weaponizes one. Derek braces against another massive blue strike and finally understands the bad part of this matchup. He can barely see her, while she only needs one clean hit to end it. That leaves him grinding forward under pressure, and Diela comes back into view in a red cloak, standing amid the wreckage with glowing eyes like she plans to finish the job herself. Then she drops fast from the sky again, still driving the fight straight upward and refusing to let him breathe. At this point, the battle has stopped being a duel and turned into a full-on lesson in how badly things go when the student and tutor both decide subtlety is optional. Derek plants himself on the platform, with his arms spread as the next threat comes in, like he's daring the fight to hit first. The opening standoff barely lasts a breath before the whole exchange turns into a live wire mess. The attack slams out, Derek K gets blown back into the air, and he answers by clenching his fist and gathering himself before his mana flares up around him. He channels it through his hand and pendant, then fires a blue beam straight back instead of giving Diela any room to breathe. Diela throws up a hand to meet the beam, then shoves back with open palm and pure force, refusing to let him own the range. Derek responds by shaping his magic into a bright blue blade, because apparently a spell can also decide it wants to be a sword today. He swings the weapon down, the two powers crash together, and Diela goes from defense to offense in a heartbeat. Elente rushes in with a kick and nails him clean, proving basic footwork can still be rude enough to ruin a mage's whole afternoon. Derek curses while Elente keeps pressing, and the exchange makes the problem obvious. She is fighting with kicks and thrown sand instead of a bigger spell. That's why he stops holding back and declares he'll meet her head on with everything he has as her brother. A bright blast erupts from below, and Elente braces for it, while Derek pushes blue power upward like he's trying to punch a hole in the sky with magic. He starts to speak after the strike lands, but the fight has already moved on to the next ugly answer. Then a blue sword drops from above, dragging an explosive trail behind it as it falls. The strike slams into the ground, the impact blows the whole area apart, and the blast rolls out so hard that Diela screams for the other girl by name. Through the wreckage, a masked figure opens its eyes and even manages a smile through the blood, which is not exactly the face of someone ready to apologize. That explosion snaps the story back a year, to the moment this whole feud starts taking shape. 1 year ago, a nobleman from House Belmiard walks a hallway with his entourage and asks how this incident should be handled. Nearby, a woman sits alone on a bench and stares away in silence, and that lonely setup is the kind of thing that tends to haunt a family for a very long time. Years before all this, the feud's shape finally comes into focus. Elente gets wrapped in blue-white mana, and the blast shows this is not a harmless lesson gone sideways. A crouched caster feeds more blue energy into the attack, while Elente's face tightens with tears, so whatever is happening here clearly hits much harder than a simple spar. On the rooftop, Elente stands behind a magical barrier with Valerian and Derek in the middle of the mess, and the whole thing has the grim energy of a family problem nobody can stand down with manners. Valerian spits out that this is from a so-called master, then Raymond Oswald Duplain steps in and puts his name on the board, which is a very noble way to make the room heavier. An older man looks at Raymond and catches the resemblance in his eyes, and that tiny detail lands like a family curse wearing decent posture. Nearby, Diela gets called out and told she needs treatment immediately, so the concern comes out loud even if the situation is already ugly. Diela turns toward Raymond from a distance, and when he touches her arm and tells her she did good work, the air shifts from tension to something much more personal. She starts to answer, but the words catch in her throat because apparently even one decent sentence is enough to scramble her. Derek stays still with that neutral look of his, then cuts straight through the nerves and tells the others to overcome frustration and grow stronger. That lands right as Diela stands apart and gets called again, which makes it clear she is the one everyone is measuring now, whether she likes it or not. Then the accusation train rolls in. A woman lashes Derek for teaching tricks and smearing filth on a noble lily, then goes further and says someone like him could never understand that world. Derek answers by pointing out this is not even a magic duel, which is a polite way of saying the whole argument has wandered off the rails. The objection hits hard enough to leave the woman shocked, and an official immediately dips his pen to record that Derek has raised Diela. Once the paperwork starts moving, the nobleman steps in to say he should grant a fitting reward as master of the estate, because even gratitude here has to wear a title. He praises Derek for teaching Diela a 1-star spell well, then makes it clear the daughter needs something bigger than an instructor. The official scratches the record clean. The master sets his hands on the ceremonial item, and the whole exchange feels like a polite door closing on one roll while opening another. Later, a bearded man asks Derek if he is already prepared to leave, and Derek confirms it while calling out the other man's ambition without blinking. Then he walks through the bright doorway and down the corridor with his cape moving behind him, like he has already been reassigned before the room finishes digesting him. Derek's new standing shows up in the simplest possible way. He is now the guy with the spellbook, and not just any book, but one with an emblem pressed into the cover. The narration hammers home how rare even a single 2-star spellbook is, which is a fancy way of saying this little object carries more weight than half the nobles in the building. Back in the present, Elente talks with someone about ice spear training and says it felt really nice, then adds that she could probably hit Brother Rake too, if she improves. That joke lands because the training is finally doing its job, and Derek's influence keeps pushing these difficult noble girls toward real progress, instead of just prettier tantrums. Derek keeps the lesson simple, and Elente goes all in, taking the mana work from theory into a glowing sphere she can actually feel in her hands. That first push turns into a real breakthrough, and when the blue aura wraps around her, even she looks startled by how far she's come. Derek stands opposite her through the magic, and by the time they both drop to their knees in that same blue light, it's obvious this is no longer just practice, it's progress. Elente admits she just wants to study magic, and Derek gives her the clean answer she needed. Then do it. It's a small line, but it lands like permission after a lifetime of someone else holding the door shut. At the grand staircase, Derek arrives with 2 attendants, and the room immediately tightens around him. One observer even mutters that it's terrible luck for the girl to end up with such a dreadful teacher, which is a pretty harsh review for a guy who hasn't even opened his mouth yet. Then the situation snaps into place. The nobles recognize Derek as the low-born tutor assigned to Diella Catherine, and the complaints start flying before he can even settle in. One noble woman snaps that no commoner can possibly teach Diella anything, while another tries to shut the whole arrangement down by reminding everyone she runs the house, husband or not. Diella stands there with her hands clasped, trying to keep her composure while all that pressure piles up around her. She looks genuinely shaken, which makes the silence around her feel even louder. Elsewhere, the scene cuts through a run of tense images and training echoes, from a voice speaking from above to a caretaker warning a blonde girl not to overdo it. Derek's influence keeps showing up in the margins now, not just in lessons, but in the way people move and react around them. Elente is then named outright as the second daughter of House Belmiar, and the recap leans into how unusual this whole path looks from the outside. Someone wonders what on earth happened to Diella, and another reaction follows with the kind of cautious thought that says Derek's kindness is starting to look less normal and more suspiciously effective. The spellbook comes back into focus, open to its mystical diagrams, and then Derek shows up in the city looking winded but still moving. That book matters because it's the kind of rare magical tool that says he's no ordinary tutor anymore, and everyone nearby is about to notice. Valerian meets him there and immediately asks what brings him around, and Derek says he wants to talk about Diella. Valerian spots the spellbook, confirms it's a 3-star one, and is clearly surprised when Derek says his grace lent it to him, because that's not the sort of thing a commoner just carries around casually. Before the conversation can go any farther, an authority figure cuts in and shuts it down, calling a halt and identifying the true mage in the group. That interruption locks the moment into place. Derek is no longer just the helpful tutor in the background. He's a known problem with enough talent to make the powerful pay attention. Derek keeps the lesson moving and tells the other side if they're done training. Then the two of them break into a run across the field as the exercise turns into a test of pace and control. He catches enough of the exchange to realize the gap is not raw power, but how mana gets used once someone reaches a higher track. And that kind of detail is exactly where a teacher either helps or gets in the way. That lesson lands hard on the girl holding the orange flowers, because she starts asking Derek what he means, and clearly does not like the answer. He spells it out in plain terms. Once a mage reaches a certain level, the way they handle mana becomes deeply personal, and forcing a teacher's style onto them only gets clumsy from there. Nice to know magic class can also turn into a polite way of saying, stop meddling. Derek stands at the desk surrounded by books and draws a line under the whole stretch of tutoring, thanking the girl for how much things have changed because of her. Then the mood flips into departure talk, with the bearded man asking when the youth will leave, and Derek answering that he'll return the library key now, which sounds calm until the way the bearded man grips himself makes it obvious this is not a casual goodbye. With that farewell settled, the story shifts to the next round of pressure, and Derek is already walking into people who want more from him than lessons. In the hallway by the large window, he and Elente face each other, and even while the motion around them stays tense, he stays stubborn enough to say they can meet again once his level rises a little more. Elsewhere, Elente gets hit with the ugly side of noble judgment when a dark figure tears into her with the kind of line that leaves no room for dignity. She reels under being called an utterly incompetent child, and then gets the full cruelty of someone telling her she should never have been born, which is the sort of family talk that could sour a banquet in one sentence. The blow leaves her shaken enough to wake in distress from the nightmare, and the fear does not just vanish when her eyes open. That crash out of sleep pushes Diella into thinking, and she starts turning over a plan in her head, deciding she may need to create a pretext and then follow it through before anyone can stop her. Soon after, someone meets up with Diella at a location and says they'd appreciate it, which gives the whole exchange the feel of a carefully arranged move rather than a random chat. Nearby, another figure lingers in profile looking conflicted, so even before anyone says more, the room already feels like it is full of people swallowing what they really want to say. The pressure finally widens out onto the terrace, where Derek faces a blonde woman with blue eyes as she prepares to depart and asks whether he is really leaving. He says he has to go back to where he came from, and when Alenti warns him it is dangerous and he could get hurt, he answers that he'll be fine and that his words should be taken to heart, which is exactly the sort of answer that keeps people worried instead of comforted. Tears spill down the noble lady's face, and the next second Derek is right there, grabbing her by the face before the moment can soften. A hooded figure steps in front of the others, and Thunder Team's warning about pirated site visits slashes in like the weirdest possible way to ruin the tension. Derek's next exchange is cleaner. The spellbook sits on the wooden table, and the sight of it sends the man beside it straight into excited overdrive. The older voice shrugs off the worry and points out there's always a shortage of mages, so Derek just says he'll start tomorrow. Then the test turns ugly, with a monster lunging at Derek and forcing him to scramble for a bow just to stay alive. He catches the attack with blue energy, draws a glowing sword into the fight, and when the dust settles, he reaches out and sends magical power through another's hand, triggering a blast that leaves him thanking whoever just dragged him back to life. Not everyone is impressed, of course, and one noblewoman calls the whole arrangement what it is: nobles beating on a commoner and pretending it's educational. Derek is still hurt against the wall when he finally gives his name, and the girl answers by agreeing to the arena while openly wondering if he's really a mage and why he looks so young. Once the fighting starts, Derek takes the field under a fresh wave of magic, and the pressure ramps up fast. Iselin, the red-haired mage competitor, answers with a huge spell that builds through her hands, a jeweled gem, and an incantation that sounds like it was written by someone trying to make the air flinch. Her spell detonates in a white blast that rolls outward, and the whole platform gets swallowed in the shockwave. Derek and Iselin keep going anyway, with magic circles, blue bursts, and a flurry of energy, turning the fight into a full-body headache for anyone standing nearby. Iselin takes the air next, kicking off into a blue surge and unloading blade projectiles from above. Derek braces under the drop, spots a point-blank ice spear coming too close to dodge, and the two of them collide in a blur of speed and impact before the battlefield starts to smear into afterimages. Even after that clash, Iselin keeps moving across the platform through the leftover energy stream, so Derek has to hunt for her all over again. He looks around and snarls that he can't see where that bastard went, which is fair since the arena is now basically a lightning storm with opinions. Iselin keeps hunting for Derek in the dark, thinking that if she can just pin down his position, she can finish this. But Derek catches the angle in time, slips the ice spear by a hair, and the attack whistles past where his head was a heartbeat ago. He stays on his feet through the barrage, now ringed by those glowing markers as more ice spears come screaming in. Derek reads the pattern and says Islin's magic is a delusion type that kills sound, which explains why her first miss mattered more than it looked. Iselin immediately realizes what that means, and that her opening shot gave her away. She answers by slamming down a huge blue wave, trying to overwhelm him before he can turn that silence against her. Derek raises his hand and forces the fight into his pace, and the two of them crash magic against magic at point-blank range. He tells Alente to focus on the moment magic manifests from his hand, then promises he'll be the first to manifest and end it, which is a very confident thing to say while standing inside a magical knife fight. He drops power through his boot and drives it into the ground, and purple lightning detonates outward from the tip. Iselin braces against the blast, then admits the attack came from the very tip of his toes, which is a humiliatingly specific detail to lose to. Derek finally says what he's been holding back. At first he looked down on her. Iselin answers with a warm smile and a simple thank you, and that lands harder than some of the spells because the fight suddenly stops feeling one-sided. The duel surges into a wall of purple lightning, and both of them keep moving inside it anyway. Derek's eyes flare red in the glare, and Iselin lunges in with a kick at the dark shape in front of her, so the whole exchange turns into pure clash and retaliation. That exchange spills over into a more awkward kind of pressure, because now the talking starts getting personal. Someone admits jealousy was the real feeling all along, then grips the glowing orb tight while trying to explain they only wanted to measure what the other person can actually do. They press the point even harder and say that's why they are asking Derek in the first place. Then the speaker turns to the young lady in front of them, and the shocked reaction makes it obvious this is no longer just about spell output. The camera pulls wider and the three of them stand together in the ornate room, with the conversation now pinned between pride and evaluation. Derek gets told he cannot beat her, and the refusal hangs in the air like a dare nobody wants to pick up too soon. That tension carries straight into the next setup, where the upcoming gathering is said to include a magic duel segment. People around them decide not to interrupt the two of them yet, and when someone asks whether Derek's abilities were vouched for, the room has already started treating him like a problem with a resume. The red-haired girl needles Valerian about his temper, and the jab lands exactly where it hurts because he clearly already feels cornered. Derek cuts in and tells the Earl that this is the point he wanted to make, which only makes the room feel tighter around the two sides. Iselin finally takes control of the lesson and announces live combat training, then gives the order to begin. That turns the whole thing from talk into a trial, and everybody in the room has to pick a side fast. Derek pushes Iselin hard harder, telling her she still has mana she can draw if she stops holding back. Eslin hears the challenge, gets scolded for falling 5 arrows short, and is told to make 1 more arrow even after saying her mana is gone. So she grits through the pain and forces magical arrows into existence anyway, then keeps going while Eslin watches her every move. By the time she mutters about 5 more arrows, the instruction jumps to 10 more, because apparently nobody in this room believes in mercy or clean stopping points. Derek, looking dead serious, tells her that if it feels impossible, giving up is also an option. The girl breaks down in tears at that, because the room has turned a basic exercise into a small war with arrows. The pressure shifts off the training line and onto Elente, who looks worn out when her servant checks on her. Then the servant brings word that House Duplain has sent a gift, and the whole mood changes from exhaustion to attention. The gift turns out to be a polished box packed with perfumes, decorative containers, and flowers, the kind of arrangement that tries very hard to look casual. Elente realizes it came from Lady Isley, and that it is meant to help, which makes the offer feel a lot more personal than a simple delivery. That softens into a quiet farewell between Iseline and Elente, and both of them actually smile for once. The moment hangs on their faces long enough for the emotion to show through, which is almost unfair in a room that has been this tense. Later, Derek sits alone by the water with a brown book at dusk, looking like he is trying to sort the whole mess out in his head. He is still on his own when the conversation turns again, and this time he is the one being pushed to answer. Derek tells the pink-haired girl that giving up can be a strategy too, and she reacts like he just insulted the floor under her feet. He walks away when she keeps pressing him, then fires back that obsessing over victory can block growth, because someone has to say the uncomfortable part out loud. That finally cracks something open in her, and she blurts that she accepts it all. Standing close to Derek now, she admits she has no reason to hate Iseline, only to face what she actually feels underneath the anger. The scene widens to the bridge, where the truth lands harder. What she hated was never Iseline at all, it was herself. That realization hits with enough force to leave her looking up with hope instead of defiance, which is a rare upgrade for a conversation like this. Derek turns back with that same hard stare and warns her to prepare herself. He starts casting right as Iseline looks uncertain, and the next exchange is already heading into spell work instead of talk. Derek cuts off the chatter and spots a goblin horde pouring in, then immediately notices there's an ogre sneaking up behind them too. When Iseline asks if he can handle the ogre, he doesn't waste time talking it up. He just reaches for his weapon and gets moving. He channels magic into the strike, and the front line of goblins starts screaming the second his attack lands. Derek keeps the pressure on with a heavy downward swing, turning the ambush into a slaughter before the goblins can even spread out. Then the fight shifts into full sword work, as Derek charges the next monster with a glowing blue blade, slips past its rush, and slices it hard across the head. He follows that with a two-handed overhead cut, and the thing bursts apart in a flash, which is about the least dignified way to lose a brawl. Derek's momentum doesn't stop there, because he powers through with orange-red fire energy, drives his sword straight into the monster, and rips it back out as it staggers. Iseline freaks out at the sheer brutality of it, and the poor thing answers by burning and screaming itself into its final second. The battle turns savage again as a snarling enemy charges in with glowing eyes, and Derek has to dodge a sweeping attack before it can tear him open. He stays just outside the worst of it, but the exchange makes it clear this fight is still far from over. The tension then snaps into a darker, more personal beat as Iseline faces him in the hall, and Derek turns with those glowing red eyes again. The scene cuts to a moonlit grand gate, then to Derek sitting against a stone wall with a letter from his old teacher, Katia Flameheart, starting with, "Dear Derek," and the blunt reminder, "I taught you magic." Back in the present, Derek brushes off Islin's question and refuses to unpack whatever that letter stirred up. When she checks on how he's feeling, he just keeps it moving, and the pair head into the academy together, while a blue glow flares behind Derek and someone calls out, "Derek!" A girl at the brick wall greets Derek like she has been waiting for him, then immediately drops the real news. He is tutoring Lady Elente in magic. Derek keeps the tone casual, but he still slips her a lesson about dual combat, telling her not to let her guard down no matter who is standing across from her. That advice lands right on time, because the fight explodes into motion as Lady Elente cuts loose with lightning-fast slashes, and the onlookers react to Lady Eslin showing up. The tension spikes when someone declares they are going to win, and Eslin steps in close, all focus and no patience. Diela and Eslin square off, and the first answer to that standoff is a hard, flat no. Then Eslin answers with fire, throwing the match into full offensive mode. Diela counters with blue ice water mana and drives it forward in a beam, meeting Eslin's orange flame head-on. The clash detonates in Eslin's face, and for a second her own attack is the one doing the bullying. Iseline refuses to fold and calls up a huge golden fire spell, then rains glowing bolts down like the sky picked a side. Diela just stands there inside the firestorm, while Iseline keeps casting from the back, stubborn enough to make the flames look personal. The instructor cuts in to explain mana control, warning that burning through every last drop is a bad habit when both girls are still standing. His advice is almost insulting in its simplicity. If they are going to spend mana, they should do it loudly and with style, which is apparently how noble lessons stay alive. Iselin locks back in and starts compressing her spell again. Then the arena fills with a towering pillar of golden fire as one girl keeps pushing for the win. The message is simple. Nobody here is conserving anything, and that usually means someone is about to regret it. An ominous figure materializes through a glowing magic circle, and the whole exchange shifts from flashy to dangerous. One side throws out a massive fire blast, the other answers with blue water ice power, and the two forces smash together hard enough to turn the middle of the field into a glowing mess. The collision leaves one girl standing inside the red-blue pressure, while another gathers a massive sphere of blue energy, looking ready to finish the argument with one shot. Derek clocks the problem immediately, because the firepower is absurd, but the non-stop blasting is draining the fight fast, and someone spots the target right after the light show clears. A girl with billowing hair stays inside the blue field and holds her ground. Then Alente finally steps in with a clean declaration that it is her turn. She gathers blue magic and launches herself upward, turning the exchange into a new phase just as the first one starts to burn out. Aislinn scrambles under Alente's first strike, and the whole exchange snaps from a clean opening into a full aerial brawl. When Alente's follow-up force keeps climbing, Aislinn stares at her in disbelief, because this is not the kind of magic she expected to be dealing with. Alente meets her in mid-air, and the two of them trade raw magical pressure instead of backing off. Aislinn answers by flooding the space with blue and pink-red energy, then flinches when Alente proves she can land ice spears from this far away, which is a very rude surprise to have in the sky. Alente keeps pressing and finally drops a decisive spell, the kind that comes with a circular rune and a single hard count behind it. The ice grows into a whole field of glowing spears, and even the onlookers have to look twice to make sure they are not seeing things. Aislinn shifts the fight back with fire, and now the ice starts converging toward a bright center while the two elements collide overhead. She drives forward through the pressure, then the clash widens into a blue and white burst that leaves her asking how Alente can throw out flame arrows too, because the toolbox just keeps getting worse for everyone else. The next exchange turns strange fast when the air itself seems to answer, and Aislinn feels mana surge up where she expected ordinary magic. Alente rises in golden light and petals, then slams the field with a red-orange blast that hits so hard both fighters get thrown back at once. Aislinn crashes and slides across the ground, then a dark figure drops through the fading effect as the dust settles around the impact zone. She catches her breath, forces herself back upright on the rock, and reaches out in shock toward Lady Alente, which is a pretty fair reaction after watching that much damage in one go. Aislinn reels at the blast and stares in disbelief, and Derek cuts in with the blunt explanation. A high-star spell from someone who barely knows how to use it is just a mana-eating monster. That lands the point hard, because the problem is not raw power anymore, it is control. Aislinn plants herself and goes back on the attack, fighting like someone who actually worked for her skill and refuses to fold. Then the exchange explodes into a brutal aerial clash, with energy throwing one girl back while the other digs in and keeps the pressure on. Aislinn keeps moving in the air, first kicking through the fight and then dragging a massive curved blade of mana down with her. When the smoke clears, she comes out of the blue aftermath stun, and the magic still has enough force to drag another figure through the light burst like it is nothing. Aislinn lands in wind and glare, cool on the outside and already measuring the fight instead of celebrating it. She checks her mana, realizes she only has enough left for 2 more spells, and chooses to push harder anyway because backing off is not in her vocabulary right now. Diela gets rocked by the spell, then hauls herself up and forces out an ice spell with pure stubbornness. She keeps begging for one more chance as she strains for a final cast, which is brave but also the exact kind of desperation that makes mages start making bad decisions. A close-up catches the eye blazing with magic, and then something ugly and winged tears into the scene with a dark aura hanging off it. The fight has clearly stopped being a simple duel and turned into a nightmare with teeth. The narration turns personal. No noble lady in Ubelstein, the place Derek came from, shone brighter than her, and that kind of light always drags a shadow behind it. She admits she has always lived in that shadow, which explains why the sudden gap in status hits so hard. The scale of the power gap becomes impossible to ignore when the contrast between the two figures says everything before either of them moves. Then the attacker throws the cruelest question of the whole exchange at her face, asking if she really thought people would stay kind just because she looked dazzling up close. Even now, the protagonist keeps smiling warmly, and that calm only makes the darkness around her feel colder. The shadow entity wraps around her legs, tightens its grip, and spreads until it starts swallowing the light itself, dragging her down as if her own radiance never stood a chance. Derek keeps forcing himself forward through the swirling mana, telling himself he will meet her someday and prove his worth. Then he breaks out into daylight, and the first thing he sees is that same serene face still holding steady, which is honestly rude levels of composure. He locks onto that calm, opens his eye with fresh resolve, and crouches on the rooftop pumping himself up to keep going. But the dark force grabs him again and drags at him, so he has to steady himself and push back before it swallows his footing too. Diela, the dark-haired woman at the residence, admits she still cannot beat Lady Aislinn, and even brings up Lady Alente as the comparison hanging over the whole match. Aislinn answers with a gracious little defeat speech, which is a fancy way of saying she can take a loss without throwing a chair. Then the question turns back on Derek, and he asks Aislinn what she thinks of him, not pretending the ending was perfect. Her eye shifts, and when she looks forward with a tear in it, the whole mood changes from bragging rights to something a lot more fragile. The scene drops under the surface and leaves him sinking in bubbles, while Aislinn thinks about just returning to that pathetic existence again. She realizes she is not so different from her after all, and that thought lands harder than the water around them. In the grand hall, Aislinn stands while someone else kneels before him, and the magic and emotion around them keep spilling out in light and tears. Her power keeps blooming at her feet, then the image widens until she stands in the foreground with that man far off in the distance, making the gap between them impossible to miss. That is why Eslin says she was not the real winner in this match. Diela spells it out right after, saying Lady Eslin is far more gifted than she is in magical talent, and the glowing portrait of Eslin undercuts any argument before it starts. The mood hardens when news about Dressed Wolftail, a 6th rank old man, reaches the room and the reaction comes out sharp. Iselin listens as the explanation ties his visit to Sir Drest's movements, and the next line makes the politics plain by wondering why Margrave Belmiard is bothering to come all the way out to Ebelstein. The answer is simple and ugly enough: they are in trouble because of the Drest situation. That pressure hangs in the air just as the scene cuts back to Derek, where Iselin tells him she is taking a break for a while, and the whole conversation suddenly feels a lot more personal. Under the table, their feet brush, and Derek gives a quiet, conflicted reply. Then he and Iselin reach across and hold hands in a moment that says more than either of them probably wants to admit. She asks if he will come back when she calls, and Derek only answers with silence, which is about as subtle as a slammed door. Derek comes back just as Eslin bolts in frustration, barking that she told them not to announce her presence. The timing is messy enough to be funny for half a second, until she freezes at the sight of her father showing up unannounced, and suddenly this is not a casual visit anymore. The mood snaps when someone screams for Derek to watch his back, and a green-clad threat lunges in with a glowing creature right behind him. Aislinn fires off red power to meet it, and the clash blooms into a brutal burst that gets labeled as 3rd rank, which is a fancy way of saying this room just got way above Derek's pay grade. The fight keeps escalating as golden-orange force swells, then Aislinn throws up a firewall, and the whole exchange turns into a full-blown magical pileup. A figure with glowing red eyes answers with fire of his own, and by the time the attack closes in, it is clear this is no ordinary scrap over pride. Inside, someone hears that Derek almost died and says it out loud like the sentence itself is doing damage. Another magician touches his chest and feels something off in the middle of all this. Then the mystery deepens again when a wandering spirit steps into view, because one supernatural headache was clearly not enough. The scene jumps to a rooftop where a girl gets caught in a blue vortex, while another mage gathers power with her hair and magic whipping around her. The caster tightens her focus, drives the spell forward, and then sends a final burst straight down, turning the roof into a launch point for trouble with very little regard for anyone below. That blast hits hard enough to leave Aislinn shocked, and the calm rooftop voice only makes it worse by insisting they have been exactly the same for a long time. It sounds less like reassurance and more like somebody measuring a crack in the wall and deciding it has been there all along. Valerian steps in beside Aislinn and needles her about the person she used to be, then starts dangling Derek in front of her like a cruel little possibility. He keeps pushing the same point from different angles, saying rumors about Derek are already spreading, which means this is no longer just about feelings or sparring. It is about who gets to shape Derek's name. Later, Derek crosses paths with Duplain's old man's side of the problem, and the man studies him with a barrel in hand before asking if his name is Derek. Derek's answer gives away the obvious surprise, and then the man cuts to the chase and asks for a private talk, which is never the kind of sentence that comes with good news. That talk moves out onto a night street, where the old man tells Derek his magic talent is too ambiguous to read cleanly. The line lands like a warning wrapped in a diagnosis, and it sets Derek up for the next round of political trouble just when he was probably hoping for a quieter life. The old man keeps talking, and Derek hears the part that matters. His skills are genuinely outstanding. That turns the whole conversation from polite probing into a real offer, because a commoner with talent is exactly the sort of person nobles start circling once they notice him. Derek freezes when he hears the name attached to that power, a 6-star mage. That is not a casual title, so the warning he was getting a moment ago suddenly feels a lot more like a doorway into trouble. Then the story cuts hard into the kind of danger that makes the talk feel small by comparison. Someone watches from a rooftop while magical claws tear down through the rain toward a building. Inside, the strike lands, a woman drops injured on the floor, and the attacker's glowing green eyes make it clear this is not some ordinary brawl. That violence connects to the real reveal. This is Drest, the mage who has just surpassed the 5-star realm and become a 6-star mage. In formal military uniform, he stands as the kind of person who can back up an offer with knights, and when he says there is no reason to refuse, the room has already lost the argument. Back in the political tangle, the red-haired official casually names Derek as the instructor, which tells you exactly where this is heading. Someone else immediately pushes in with the kind of question that sounds polite right up until it stops sounding polite, asking whether he is the commander of the mercenary corps. Iselin steps in next, and she is already measuring who has grabbed whom before anyone else can. She asks whether Duplain has taken Derek first or whether Veltus did, then cuts herself off when she realizes there was no such information to begin with, which is a very noble way to say she is annoyed and gathering facts at the same time. The pressure keeps building until even the timing of the day matters, and Derek admits it is important. He immediately follows that by asking what in the world the Ice Greatsword actually is, which is either a serious question or the fastest way to show he has walked into the middle of a specialty problem with no map. The scene shifts again, now into a glowing cave where 2 figures sit face to face, and Derek appears in the middle of a magical demonstration. Green energy wraps around him as he explains his abilities step by step, including a 1-star threat detection skill and a 3-star power that can see through disguises, which is the sort of resume detail that makes people stop smiling. The exchange ends with an elderly man speaking to Derek and sounding far too certain about the future, telling him that he will find him. Derek is left asking the only reasonable follow-up, because once somebody starts predicting your future, you do not just nod and pretend that was normal. The older man presses Derek on Valerian, then makes the connection plain. He is the eldest son of House Duplain, which is exactly the sort of detail that turns a conversation into a problem. He follows that by saying he does not want Derek to die either, then lifts a glowing hand and makes the warning simple. If Derek wants to survive, he has to get stronger. Derek answers with raw magic, flooding his hand with a huge surge and then blasting it straight up through the cavern. That is not a casual demonstration, that is a full-body announcement that this guy has no intention of staying small. Elsewhere, Bella walks off with her companion while a man disappears in the distance, and the whole thing leaves her thinking something does not add up. Diella then comments that Bella usually lies around reading books, so looking like this means something changed, and the obvious guess is either luck or a great teacher. She adds that there is no better place to train magic than the Duplain Mansion, which is a very fancy way of saying the house has become a training ground, whether it likes it or not. Bella and Diella arrive at Beldune's Tier, the tavern where mercenary clients and requests are handled, and start asking around for Derek. The answers are ugly, nobody knows where he is, and 3 teams have already come and gone this morning, so the search is already turning into a mess. Diella sends Bella to check the carriage transit records, because if Derek is moving around the city, paper trails are the next best thing to magic. In the archive, Bella asks how Diella knew Sir Drest had visited, and Diella quietly clocks how serious Drest is about magic, even though he abandoned a 5-star path. Bella starts reading from the records and realizes the trail is getting bigger, with the Great Duke and Belmiard apparently tied into it too. That kind of paperwork is never just paperwork, and now the search looks a lot less like a missing person problem and a lot more like noble business. At the frozen site, an old man tells the red-eyed man to go out and meet the guests, but the red-eyed man refuses to move like this is not his job description. A maid panics as silver-haired Lady Denise appears, and Denise immediately tells Bella to stay behind her before admitting she is not confident in offensive magic, but has no choice. The red-eyed man draws his sword, a dark spell gathers with glowing runes, and then he recognizes Lady Denise by name. Just as the confrontation locks in, 3 figures stand in the frozen chamber under the looming ice above, and everybody in range looks one bad decision away from trouble. The story slaps up the title, Noble Lady Reformation Guide, and that lands like a promise that Derek's mess is only getting more organized from here. Then Diella says she wanted to talk to him even if it was only once, while Derek looks down with that pained expression that says the tutoring pressure is catching up fast. The woman keeps pressing Derek with this absurdly intimate line about meeting him in her dreams, then immediately asks him to teach her and look genuinely thrilled if he says yes. Derek, being Derek, cuts straight through the mood and asks if she is rehearsing for a play, because the cave echoes like that, which is a very him way to stab romance with a stick. That lands badly enough that Diella gets kicked or struck aside with a sharp G's, and the whole thing snaps from flustered to ugly. Derek and the woman clutch at each other in the same breath. She gets way too close and starts commenting on feeling his breath, and he instantly turns suspicious when he realizes she is trying to work the moment for magic, not affection. Derek calls her out for chanting Ice Spear, then doubles down by saying that only proves how little she actually knows. So the scene stops pretending to be a flirtation and turns into another one of his blunt lessons, with Derek treating the whole setup like a bad magic exam. Meanwhile, another woman and her companion move through the canyon path after figuring out that man's true identity, which kicks the politics into motion. Denise refuses to back down because if she does, another house will snatch him away, and then she asks for a favor so important that even she sounds like she hates needing it. Back in the cave, Derek sits looking worn down, and a girl admits there is not much she can do, which is about as encouraging as a flat tire. Derek tells her that doing this will not change anything, but then he still accepts what she offers gratefully, and the urgency in her reaction makes it clear this small exchange matters more than he wants to admit. Something hits or shoves the girl hard enough to throw the moment off balance, and somebody nearby explodes in rage over a selfish exploiter. The tension spikes again when a woman warns that the head butler of House Duplain is coming this way, which means the trouble has officially grown legs and a title. Diella looks down below and wonders if the crowd is going to war, which is a fair question when everyone starts gathering like this. The meeting turns formal in the stone chamber, and whatever is being handed over or decided has people acting like they are about to report for battle instead of a conversation. One girl receives something and calls it an honor, then breaks into a relieved smile while being held close. A close look at her eyes shows a magical symbol, and before anyone can settle that mystery, another girl is crying out and clinging to a figure for help like her entire plan just left the building. Then Derek gets pressed to leave immediately, and he flatly refuses the request instead of rolling over for once. He says outright that at his current level, he cannot help Lady Aiseline much, and he will not teach magic half-heartedly, which is basically Derek admitting he would rather be useless than fake competence. Lady Aiseline answers by ordering the swift soldiers gathered right now, because if Derek will not move on command, the situation clearly needs more boots. Someone else holds up a glowing 4-petal jeweled pendant, while another woman admits she used to get anything she wanted by being stubborn. But this time, even that trick is failing. Denise unleashes bright yellow magic, and then explains that the mercenary mage is not the sort of person who cares about someone's background or money. That is exactly why Derek stays dangerous to noble plans, because he is the kind of teacher who cannot be bought with pretty words or a polished surname. Denise flares cyan blue with a burst of magic, but the blast knocks her flat before she can hold her ground. Bella lunges toward her and cries out, stunned that it all just ended that fast. Later, someone sits off by themselves and sums up their life in one bitter sentence. It is politics and acting. When told they are too proud and should go to Iceland, they turn to listen, and the conversation shifts from attitude to the real problem. Outdoors, one woman finally admits what started the whole mess when she's asked why she hates magic. She tries to backpedal and says she used to like it, then concedes the uglier truth that magic was never the goal, praise was. Reading later, she hits the wall and asks why she is even doing this, or what she is supposed to be at all. Then she shuts the whole thing down with a tired little verdict, because after long enough, praise stops tasting like anything at all. She even sounds startled when Derek actually keeps listening, like she expected to be preaching to empty air. Then she blurts out that she's jealous, and follows it by telling him he'll become a great mage, which is a pretty loaded thing to say while trying to act casual. Derek answers in the dark with a simple promise. If they ever meet again, at least say hello. Right after that, a blinding light tears across the sky, and the night stops feeling normal in a hurry. Derek then stands on a cliff and watches armored soldiers marching through the forest below, which tells him the nobility's problems are getting louder by the hour. The next sight is a grand building under a bright sky, and the scale alone makes it clear this is where those problems like to gather. Inside, a maid brushes a white-haired lady's hair and asks whether Aisling really got rejected, dragging court gossip straight into the room. Before that can settle, a male visitor in a suit arrives for dinner, and the maid announces him like the meal itself already has political obligations. Derek's face tightens at whatever he sees next, and then the story cuts to a strange eye filled with a glowing spiral, the kind of look that means somebody is using power they should probably not toy with. That warning lands hard once the scene shifts again. A silver-haired woman holds a confused brown-haired child while both of them stare at each other like they've missed some very important memo. Then the focus drops into a cave, where someone starts pushing blue magic through their body and forcing the power to build. The mage keeps pressing harder, muttering for just a little more until the mana starts climbing into dangerous territory. When the power finally spikes, a blast hits while the caster keeps the eyes shut, and then red light flashes through one eye as blue lightning crawls around the body. A hand comes up, wrapped in white-trimmed blue energy, marked with a single count as the spell reaches its next step. Then blue magical blades come crashing down, but the defender meets them inside a blue aura, still clutching a small banner-like object like it somehow belongs in a battlefield. Derek is already pushed to the edge when the older man looks down at him and warns that he might collapse at this rate. Then he orders Derek to leave this place, and the warning lands like a door slamming shut on whatever was happening here. Instead of backing off, Derek's eyes flare red and tears well up from the strain, like his body is arguing with his ambition in real time. A golden light bursts down from above and tears open a gate, and somebody off-screen immediately makes the mood worse by promising, "You won't survive." The tension snaps into a new cut. A figure stands in a forest with a weapon raised overhead, and the number 7 hangs there like a stage mark nobody bothered to explain. After that, Derek sits alone at night, thinking hard, and even the campfire scene with Kohela's name in the air feels like the kind of quiet that comes right before another bad decision. Derek keeps trying to play the helpful tutor, asking whether there is any request and offering to assist as much as he can. But the woman in front of him shuts that down immediately, saying she has no intention of learning magic, which is a pretty bold answer to give a man who clearly brought the whole problem with him. The refusal turns ugly fast as red energy floods the scene, and Derek ends up thrown or sprawled in it, while his red eyes burn in close up. He answers with a hard line of his own, declaring that he will not tolerate this, so the conversation stops pretending to be civil. That hostility hangs in the air when two figures stand apart inside a shadowed chamber, and one of them finally gets named Iceline. The pale-haired one apologizes, and then the two make physical contact, which at least proves this conflict can still be handled with hands instead of just threats. From there, the story jumps back into court pressure, because a maid reports that a letter has arrived from the main house. Someone immediately decides that means a proper gift needs preparing for his first departure ceremony, and suddenly Derek's life is back under noble scheduling rules, which is somehow worse than combat. Derek then takes another swing at the same argument, and the complaint comes out plain. Magic is only good for him, so why force it on others? The other side fires back just as fiercely about refusing anything less than beautiful, brilliant works, because apparently taste now counts as a battlefield. Dila stands off to the side while a woman admits she does not even find those novels interesting, then makes it clear that is not the real issue. The real issue is competence, and she says this whole thing will make her look so incompetent, which is a brutal thing to say while still standing upright. The mood shifts again as a blanket gets pulled down slowly, revealing a determined face underneath, and then that same woman looks straight ahead with a solemn, seriously. That leads into a shadowed figure with supernatural features and a title card that spells out the whole point of the next stretch. Noble Lady Reformation Guide. At night, two figures sit together and one comforts the other, then starts handing down the kind of political advice nobles survive on. He tells the younger one to maintain good relations with 3 major noble houses, and not to swear loyalty to any side, which is less a pep talk and more a survival manual. The whole pressure cooker finally spills into open movement, as Derek raises a sword toward a woman's weapon, and the next exchange is pure confrontation. Then 2 women run across a moonlit terrace beside the lake, and that new assignment feels a lot less like ceremony and a lot more like the next mess he has to manage. Bella presses the lady about responsibility, warning that this path could send her straight to hell if she keeps acting this way. Then she lands the sharper jab, saying the lady has gone cold and empty just like him, which is not the sort of compliment people usually ask for. The exchange turns physical when the woman is sent flying through the air, and for a second it looks ugly enough to end in a crash. But she catches on fast enough to realize the wicked guy is actually letting her go, so the whole move was more restraint than attack. A close look at Derek, the white-haired mage with the red eye, makes it obvious he is already back in the middle of trouble. Right after that, a maid throws blue magic at a pink-haired lady while shouting at her, so the room snaps from awkward to explosive in one breath. Derek gets cornered next, with someone accusing him of chatting too happily with Mr. Phoebe the gardener, as if small talk has suddenly become a crime. Then an authority figure cuts in and tells him to head straight to the study and start self-study immediately, because even court life apparently has homework. Somewhere else, a male noble sits clutching a red item while listening to a speaker insist he will win over the servants. The mood sours fast when the report turns negative, since the lady in question apparently finds everything bothersome and lacks motivation, which is a brutal way to describe someone who just wants to lie down and ignore the entire estate. Bella hears that the servants were only smiling because politeness is part of the job, not because the praise was real. Then the conversation swerves into the kind of embarrassment that sticks, as someone asks if she is writing a novel called The Arrogant Sir Robane, and Bella freaks out at the idea that anyone else knows about it. The discussion digs into Tracy's past and how Sir Robane reacted way too strongly, so the topic stops being a joke and starts sounding like a real scandal. After that, the speaker points out her greatest strengths, which at least gives the poor girl something sturdier than gossip to stand on. Then the whole thing circles back to the good-for-nothing Lady Diela, and the insult hangs there like a fresh headache. From there, the order comes down plainly. She has to attend next week's meeting for debutante preparations, whether she likes the social circus or not, and she finally gives in with a grudging fine.